Good evening. Welcome to our study tonight. Before I begin, let me just give you one kind of an announcement. Next week we will not be having study, and Lord willing, we'll have it the week after that. So next week, no study. I'll announce that again before we start on the study itself. All right, let's go into in the news this week. Lots happening. Let's talk about this one. And this one is really pretty shocking. I'm surprised that nobody's carrying it, to be honest with you. It says demographic winter is coming. Fertility rates plummet all over the globe. So fertility starting to cause major problems all over the globe. Aging populations are counting on younger generations to take care of them when they get old, but younger generations are not nearly large enough to accomplish the task. Meanwhile, there aren't enough qualified young workers in many fields to replace the expertise of older workers that are now retiring. Sadly, this is just the beginning. If fertility rates continue to drop, we could potentially be facing an unprecedented global population collapse in the decades ahead. And this is not being sensational. This is absolutely true. Even the mainstream media is starting to do stories about this. Not a lot, but they're starting. In fact, an economist that was just interviewed by the Wall Street Journal is warning that demographic winter is coming. Fertility is falling almost everywhere for women across all levels of income, education, and labor force participation. The falling birth rates come with huge implications for the way people live, how economies grow, and the standards and standings of the world superpowers. In high-income nations, fertility fell below replacement in the 1970s and took a leg down again during the pandemic. And it's dropping in developing countries also. India just surpassed China, and its fertility rate is now way below replacement. And by the way, replacement is one person born for every person that dies. Used to be, that was the standard all over the world, no longer. Unfortunately, our fertility rate dropped just to 1.62%, which was an all-time record low this year. Had fertility stayed near 2.1, where it stayed in 2007, the U.S. would have welcomed an estimated 10.6 million more babies. Our native-born population has been in decline for quite some time. The only reason why the United States population as a whole has not been shrinking is because of the tremendous amount of immigration that has been happening. But even though it's not shrinking, the United States population has been rapidly getting older. And it's being projected that just 6 years from now, seniors will actually outnumber children for the first time in our entire U.S. history. The silver tsunami is what they're calling it. It's already been a burden on working age people, and it's doubled since 1960, when there were 6 workers for everyone over 65. Needless to say, seniors are counting on all the rest of you to fund Social Security and Medicare. It isn't just the United States, though, that's dealing with this problem. In Japan, South Korea, China, fertility rates are even lower than they are in the United States. An aging population, including Japan, whose population is expected to shrink 30% by 2070, when 4 in 10 will be over 65. The situation is so stark in South Korea that Oxford University professor David Coleman predicted the entire country, listen to this, will be extinct at current rates by 2350. And even China, which recently lost its status as the world's most populous nation to India, is now shrinking at a rate of nearly 1 million people a year. And fertility rates are also way down and below replacement levels all over Europe. Italy, Spain, Andorra were projected to have the lowest fertility rates. So what's causing it? Well, sperm counts have dropped to catastrophically low levels all over the planet. Sperm counts continue to decline at the rate they have been. Eventually, most males will be infertile. Infertility is also frightening levels among our young women. Meanwhile, our culture has become rapidly anti-child and rapidly anti-family. And as a result, there are vast hordes of young people that have decided they never want to be parents. And thanks to the global reach of our entertainment industry, United States is, we're constantly exporting our culture to the rest of the world. Population decline has already become a major political issue in nations all over the globe. And during the years ahead, vast numbers of people will be wiped out by wars, pestilences, famines, and natural disasters. Humanity has become incredibly selfish and self-centered. And as a result, we've stopped caring about our futures. All throughout human history, successful societies have always greatly valued, marriage, family, and children. But now, we've embraced new values, and we are rapidly destroying the bright future that we could have had. Does Scripture say anything about it? Well, actually, Jesus says something about it. Knowing their thoughts, Jesus said to them, "Every kingdom divided against itself will be laid waste, and every city or household divided against itself will not stand. And so we're watching something deteriorate pretty rapidly. Let's go a little bit further, and let me give you a little bit about Israel. Biden war advice to Israel should concern all of us for our own future conflicts. The Biden administration's claim that an Israeli invasion into Rafah would not help the nation defeat Hamas or secure a hostage release makes no logical sense, just like his administration. Several experts told the Daily Caller News Foundation. White House National Security spokesman John Kirby said on Thursday that Israel cannot achieve a sustainable and enduring defeat against Hamas by invading Rafah, also claiming that could jeopardize ongoing negotiations to free the hostages in Gaza. How's that going? Experts told the DCNF, the Daily Caller News Foundation, that the claim doesn't hold water, as a military operation is the only way to pressure Hamas into reaching a hostage deal and eventually achieve victory over the terror group. Two high-level defense experts and a former senior U.S. official told the DCNF that Kirby is badly mistaken and that the only way to ensure Hamas is defeating it through military operations. Kirby is wrong, Mark Dubowitz said, CEO of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, a Washington-based defense think tank, and he told the Daily News. The lack of military pressure from Israel would make Hamas less incentivized to reach a hostage and ceasefire deal. Hamas isn't stupid. As long as the Biden administration works to constrain Israel, Hamas doesn't have to do anything. And they haven't since October 7th. When someone announces they want to kill you, they train to kill you, they arm to kill you, they teach their children that if the adults don't finish the job in this generation, the children are expected to do it in the next generation. When they say 100 October 7th, they're not kidding. Israeli forces seized control of Rafah crossing bordering Egypt on Tuesday, saying that it was a vital choke point to stop the flow of weapons into Gaza, according to the Wall Street Journal. The IDF is moving further into the eastern corridors of Rafah, but has not yet gone into Rafah city, and that's why all the commotion is here, where the bulk of more than 1 million refugees are located, according to the Associated Press. Obviously, Hamas are using them, 1 million of them, as human shields. Biden said during a CNN interview on Wednesday that the administration has not seen Israel cross the line in Rafah yet, but warned of consequences, including halting military aid if Israel launches a full-scale invasion. If Israel had listened to the White House since this war began, Hamas terrorist battalions would still be standing. Dozens of senior Hamas terrorist leaders would still be alive and directing terror operations. Dozens of Israeli and foreign hostages would still be languishing in the helm of Hamas captivity, and Hamas would still be in charge, planning the next October 7th. The Biden administration pressure on Israel has only prolonged the war and the suffering in that area. Let's go a little bit further and talk to you about economy. And I'm really starting to see some really ominous signs in our economy, and today this kind of shocked me, and I've been knowing a little bit about it, but I went a little bit further in my study of it, and it'll probably shock you too. The restaurant apocalypse is starting to sweep across the nation as Americans cut back. You can really get a good idea of the United States economy and how it's doing by watching restaurants in your area. Sadly, in 2024, it appears that a restaurant apocalypse has started to sweep across America. Americans under the age of 40 love to eat out, but these days, most of them are experiencing financial stress, and this is having an enormous impact on the restaurant industry. Americans are eating out less as inflation weakens the dollar in their pocket. Even in the Big Apple, large numbers of restaurants are being shut down. Eater New York reported that over 40 bars and restaurants closed in New York City from December 2023 to January 2024, 1 month. After closing 46 restaurants last year, Applebee's has decided this week to close another 35 locations this year. Red Lobster is also deeply struggling as it abruptly closed at least 48 of its restaurants in the latest blow to a financially struggling company that reportedly is considering whether to declare bankruptcy. Let me give you a couple other ones. This is just a couple as I researched it. Other chains that will be closing a majority of its restaurants nationwide include Cracker Barrel, 72 restaurants, TGI Fridays, 36 closings, Denny's, 57, Nud Pizzeria, that's NOD, 27 restaurant closings, Subaru Pizza, 87, Outback Steakhouse, 41, Hardee's, 30, and Tijuana Flats, 40. And what's happening to Boston Market? At one time, they had almost 1,000 locations all over the United States, but now their entire chain is about to go belly up. Our ongoing inflation crisis is the primary reason why this is happening. And don't believe Biden when he says he took office and it was 9.1% inflation. It was 1.3. That man lies every time he breathes. Consumers simply have a lot less discretionary income now. Meanwhile, restaurants are facing much higher costs. Unfortunately, things aren't going to get better too soon. We've reached a point where the vast majority of Americans just can't afford to eat out on a regular basis. Needless to say, that is really bad news for fast chains like McDonald's. But now most middle-class families just can't even afford to eat at McDonald's very often. In a desperate attempt to lure them back, McDonald's will soon be introducing a $5 meal, but it's just for 1 month. So they're going to bring back affordable food for just a month. That's just great. But unless they make the $5 meal permanent, I don't expect that it'll make much of a difference. American people are deeply pessimistic about the economy at this stage, and they have good reason to be pessimistic. Because even though our politicians in Washington are engaging in an unprecedented spending spree in a desperate attempt to keep the economy propped up, the truth is that the wheels are starting to come off and tremendous chaos is ahead. The economy is going to take a nosedive sometime in the next 12 months. We are spending, wait to hear this, $1 trillion every 100 days. Repeat that. $1 trillion every 100 days. The only job creation is government jobs, and they don't actually add to the economy. So, low income and the middle class are getting squeezed while the rich continue to plug along. At one time, the entire world marveled at the greatness and the mighty U.S. economy, but our leaders have completely wrecked it. There's no way that we're going to be able to avoid disaster. So I would encourage you to prepare for very hard times while you still can. And my motto is this: get out of debt as soon as you can, and don't make more debt. This is not the time to do it. Let's go a little bit further, talk to you a little bit more about economy, kind of overrides the last article. Frustration builds as the gap between the rich and the poor is larger than ever. Have you ever felt like you never can seem to get ahead, no matter how hard you try? If so, you're definitely not alone. Unfortunately, our economy has evolved into a highly centralized system that is designed to drain wealth from those that do not own wealth producing assets and transfer it to those that do own wealth producing assets. Sadly, even most of our homes and most of our vehicles have been turned into wealth producing assets by the elite. Every month when you make your mortgage payment and your vehicle payment, you're making the wealthy even wealthier. The entire system is designed to get you deep into debt and keep you paying on that debt until you die. As we've seen in recent years, those that manage the system will do whatever it takes to protect the wealth of the elite, like bailing out banks. The Federal Reserve pumped trillions of dollars into the system to prop up the value of financial assets, and it worked. Right now, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is hovering around 40,000 points, and those that own stocks are living the high life. But who owns most of the stocks? Who's getting rich? Well, according to Federal Reserve data, the wealthiest 10% of all Americans own a record high 93% of all the stocks on Wall Street. The wealthiest Americans have never owned so much of the stock market. On the flip side, the poorest 50% of all Americans own just 1% of all the stocks. Of course, stocks are just one form of wealth, but when you add in other forms of wealth, the bottom 50% of the US population still only owns just 2.6% of all the wealth in the United States. Tens of millions of Americans have lost faith in the system and are becoming increasingly restless, and our politicians have been trying to keep them pacified with handouts. At this point, a whopping 42 million Americans receive food stamps and benefits each month, and much of that money is spent on junk food. Coca-Cola, Sprite, other soft drinks are the most commonly bought items via the $135 billion a year Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, a new study says. Candy, potato chips, frozen pizza, ice cream, cookies, and other ultra-processed food dominates the top 20 items, says a report from the Economic Policy Innovation Center, EPIC. A lot of those that are receiving government assistance are actually employed, but the cost of living has become so oppressive that even people working for some of the biggest companies in America can't afford the basics. Today, approximately 40% of the entire U.S. population is either living in poverty or is considered to be among the ranks of the working poor. In order to maintain the same standard of living as it did in 2021. Listen to this. It now costs the average American family, that's us, you, me, $12,000 more per year to buy the same things. So if your income hasn't increased $12,000 a year since January 2021, you're falling behind. And now that economic conditions are starting to deteriorate at a frightening pace, Americans are becoming increasingly pessimistic about where the economy is heading next. That pessimism is altering consumers' spending habits. McDonald's, Home Depot, Under Armour, Starbucks, all recently reported disappointing earnings as people cut back on fast food, kitchen renovations, sneakers, and afternoon lattes. Frustration with the economy is going to be a major theme during the next few years here in the United States. And if you're smart and you're voting in November, you'll understand that. Bidenomics does not work. It kills us. Of course, the entire world is grappling with a system that is leaving way too many people behind. According to Oxfam, most of the global population has gotten poorer since the turn of the decade. Since 2020, 5 billion people have become poorer, while the world's 5 richest men have more than doubled their fortunes at a rate of $14 million per hour. You heard me right? $14 million per hour. Just like in the United States, the gap between the wealthy and the poor globally has reached a level we have never ever seen before. Since 2020, Oxfam says that billionaires have gotten $3.3 trillion richer. Hundreds of millions of people are becoming deeply angry and deeply frustrated, and civil unrest will erupt in major cities all over the planet during the period of great chaos that we are now entering. Today, the world is dominated by ultra-powerful governments, ultra-powerful banks, and ultra-powerful corporations. The little guy is being absolutely crushed, but it won't be too long before the deeply corrupt system that the ultra-wealthy have created suddenly implodes right in front of their eyes. So we're watching some things happen on a global scale that's really not too encouraging. Let's go a little bit more about war. This is buried facts about the Gaza war. The extent to which the political class and the media are burying facts that undermine their poisonous narrative in order to defame and blame Israel has become simply jaw-dropping. The Biden administration has gone to great lengths to appease the genocidal and terrorist Iranian regime. It has funneled billions into Iran's coffers through sanctions reliefs. It has refused to effectively respond to repeated Iran-backed attacks on U.S. interests. And it's doing everything it can to prevent Israel from taking actions that would damage Americans' relationships with the Iranian regime, such as the destruction of Hamas, a vital force in Tehran's proxy army against Israel in the West. The American appeasement of Iran has left many people mystified. They should have been paying more attention. 12 days before October 7th program, Jay Solomon reported on the Senate site that Ariana Tabatabai, now please listen to this because you're never going to hear this in the news, Chief of Staff to the U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low-Intensity Conflict, was part of an Iran experts initiative created by senior Iranian Foreign Ministry officials to bolster Tehran's position on global security issues. She works for the U.S. government defense forces and their nuclear program. In other words, Tabatabai was an agent of influence for Iran in the heart of the U.S. government and with the highest level of U.S. security influence. 31 U.S. senators wrote to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin to express their concern. They wrote, quote, "We find it unconscionable that a senior department official would continue to hold a sensitive position despite her alleged participation in an Iranian government information operation." They noted that in March 2021, shortly after Tabatabai was appointed senior advisor to the Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security, Iranian dissidents reported her long history of echoing the Iranian regime's talking points. She parroted the Iranian regime's position at multiple public appearances and also said that her father was part of the Iranian President Hassan Rouhani's inner circle. In April 2021, several members of the House of Representatives requested a review of Tabatabai's security clearance. In response, the Biden administration dismissed these claims as smears and slander. Even more astonishing, Tabatabai runs the office overseeing hostage negotiations. 3 weeks after October 7th, a reporter asked White House spokesman John Kirby whether it was appropriate for Tabatabai to be in such a position given the claims that are made against her. Kirby stalled. Then he said, "Tabatabai is still here." Should we not be hearing about this on mainstream media? You're not at all. This, as well as I know, is one of the only places you'll hear it right here. So the mainstream media seriously and studiously ignores it. Over the past few days, they've ignored another vital revelation. From the start of the war, Israel has been accused of killing Palestinian civilians. Gaza Health Ministry claims 35,000 have been killed civilians by Israel. Most, they say, were women and children. These figures, promoted by the United Nations and used by both the Biden administration and the UK government to berate and threaten Israel, have fueled mass demonstrations and attacks on Jewish people worldwide. That's why we see it in the colleges. That's why we see them marching. That's why we see them talking about Israel in a negative way. On May 8th, however, the UN Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs halved its figures for the number of women and children killed in Gaza from the number it gave the day before, one half of them, 17,000. Preposterously, UN spokesman Farhar Haq tried to maintain that claim of 35,000 dead remained unchanged. And the only new development was that more than 10,000 bodies still had to be fully identified. This, however, was merely an attempt to cover up the fact that the UN has been putting out Hamas figures that were always demonstrably ludicrous, since they did not differentiate between terrorists and civilians. In early April, the statisticians authoritatively demolished these figures as statistically impossible. The Gaza Health Ministry quietly admitted that it had incomplete data for more than 10,000 individuals on its lists, and revealed that it even obtained some of its numbers from the media. Now the UN has felt forced to adjust its own figures while fudging the reason. Given that Israel says it has killed some 14,000 combatants, the ratio of civilians to combatants killed stands now at around 1-to-1, a far lower proportion of civilians killed than any other country has ever achieved in a war, including Ukraine. In other words, this is a total refutation of the incendiary lie of disproportionate killings of civilians, with which the United States and the British government and Western media have been beating up Israel for and fueling incitement against the Jews around the world. Yet not one single word has been heard about this from either the government or the media. Nobody has told us that this is a lie. All they've done is continue to push it. Our media is propaganda arm of the Biden administration. The Biden administration is trying to force Israel to accept a PA-run administration in Gaza. And Ariane Tabatabai is still in her post at the Defense Department. The mainstream media says absolutely nothing about any of this, because nothing can be allowed to destroy the left wing's driving narrative of Israeli oppression and Palestinian victimization. Biden's betrayal of Israel is widely attributed to his need to buy off the hard left of the Democratic Party. But his administration was rotten from the start, and it's still rotten. It's widely seated with Obama retread officials who are viscerally hostile to Israel. Some of them have histories of supporting Palestinian terrorist groups in your nation, in your government. Now Iran is said to be nearing the ability to make nuclear weapons. When it announces it succeeded, the United States and the United Kingdom will doubtless say they did everything they could to stop it. And if Israel tries to defend itself against this nightmare scenario, the West will accuse it of aggression. The dots have been obvious for years. All we need to do is connect them. Along with that, Iranian President chopper crash, this article says, is Mossad behind the accident. So the Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi, hardline ally of Khamenei, he was killed in a helicopter crash. The United States says it had nothing to do with it. State Department says it reaffirms support for Iranian people in the struggle for freedom, and it sends its condolences. This man is the butcher of Tehran. He has killed more people than you could possibly imagine. And now we are sending condolences? That's like us sending condolences to Adolf Hitler after he is found dead. This is absolutely ridiculous. How much are we trying to appease Iran? An Israel official who requested anonymity told Reuters he was not involved in the crash. Let me just tell you this. Israel probably was involved in the crash. Israel has a history of taking out. Mossad is one of the most powerful counterintelligence special forces in the world. They have a history of taking out aggressive administrations and their leaders all over the world. And the first thing they do as soon as they take them out, because they do it clandestinely, the first thing they do is say, oh, we don't know what happened. But I promise you Mossad is behind this. So we're watching this thing continue to escalate. And we haven't talked about him in a while, but I think we need to. The Pope, An article came out this week that says some of the Pope's comments contradict the teachings of the Bible. Pope Francis' recent comments, Amoris Laetitia, he directed towards members of the Catholic Church. Here's some of the things he said. I'm only giving a couple of them. Commenting on imperfect Catholics, the Pope noted, no one can be condemned forever. That is absolutely wrong. Yes, people can be condemned forever. Jesus warned. Addressing free speech, the Pope reflected, you cannot provoke, you cannot insult the faith of others. You cannot make fun of the faith of others. Yet in 1 Kings 8:27, God's chosen prophet Elijah, in righteous arrogance, provoked, insulted, and made fun of the faith of others because of their erroneous false beliefs. On misogyny, the Pope stated, the fact that women was taken from a rib, and he starts laughing loudly. I'm joking, says, I'm really joking. That was just a joke. Why does he say that? Well, this Pope has admitted being an advocate of a false, unproven theory of evolution, which for decades has been taught in public schools to change impressionable young minds. Thus, the concept of a supernatural, limitless God, surely able to create a woman from a man's rib, Pope Francis comedically reduces Genesis 2:22 to mythical standards. Concerning gay priests, sexual orientation, and those members living in irregular situations, the Pope declares, if someone is gay and he searches for the Lord and has goodwill, who am I to judge? Unfortunately, the Pope fails to mention the ultimate fate of those who refuse to repent of their aberrant behavior, as confirmed in 1 Corinthians 6, 9, and 10. As the current worldwide spiritual leader of over 1 billion Catholics, God holds Pope Francis responsible to cry out, spare not, lift up your voice like a trumpet, and show my people their transgressions, just as Isaiah warned the Israelites in his day, Isaiah 58:1. Instead, it appears that this Pope is sugarcoating God's instructions and watering down his supreme ordinances. Tough time for religion. And this, obviously you've heard of this, commencement speech causes outrage for challenging progressive norms. On May 11th, Kansas City chief kicker Harrison Butker delivered what has now turned out to be the most controversial commencement speech in U.S. history. During his address at Benedictine College, a Catholic college, he expressed traditional Christian viewpoints that nearly the entire country would have agreed with just a few generations ago. But expressing those same viewpoints today has created a firestorm of controversy. Enraged leftists are seething with rage and are demanding that the Kansas City Chiefs release him immediately. So exactly what did he say that was so controversial? Well, he dared to suggest that most of the young women in the audience are more excited about marriage and family than they are about their future careers. Truth is, we should all value marriage and family over our careers. If we had our priorities in order, listen to it, it ties into what I said before. Fertility rates would not be way below replacement level all over the industrialized world right now. Butker also told the crowd that we need to fight against the cultural emasculation of men. And he's right. There's been a relentless assault on masculinity in recent years, and it gets worse with each passing year. Today, most of our young males don't even know how to act like men. And that's because our culture has trained them to regard true masculinity as something bad. During his speech, Butker also spoke out against abortion, and he greatly criticized Joe Biden for being a pro-abortion Catholic. Quote, our own nation is led by a man who publicly and proudly proclaims his Catholic faith, but at the same time is delusional enough to make the sign of the cross during a pro-abortion rally, Butler said. He has been so vocal in his support for the murder of innocent babies that I'm sure to many people it appears that you can be both Catholic and pro-choice. You cannot. When Joe Biden made the sign of the cross at a pro-abortion rally, it truly was a blasphemous act. Butker's statement explicitly argues that there's a correct way to be Catholic, even though in reality, most Catholics are supportive of abortion and LGBT rights. 63% of Catholics support legal abortion. Those poll numbers should make us all very sad. This is our country now, and it's going downhill very rapidly. Top of everything else, Butker dared to suggest that dangerous gender ideologies are doing damage to our young people. He also criticized generous ideologies that politicians are pushing onto the youth of America, an oblique critique of trans rights. Harrison Butker is a Catholic that was expressing traditional Catholic viewpoints to an audience of Catholics at a Catholic institution of higher learning. But in today's environment, any public figure that dares to challenge the social programming that is being forced down our throats is likely to get in big trouble. Once Butker's commencement address started making headlines, the NFL quickly distanced itself from his views. The NFL was such a great organization in the 1970s and 80s, but now it's become a sick joke. Leftists want the Kansas City Chiefs to get rid of Harrison Butker immediately, and a petition calling for his ouster has already garnered more than 200,000 signatures. But in recent days, the wife and daughter of the owner of the Chief have both expressed their support for Butker. Tavia Hunt argued that it is not bigoted to affirm motherhood, praise your wife, and highlight the sacrifice and dedication it takes to be a mother. Countless highly educated women, she said, devote their lives to nurturing and guiding their children. Someone disagreeing with you doesn't make them hateful. It simply means they have a different opinion. Her daughter, Gracie Hunt, 25, appeared at a church outreach event in Dallas. She was asked on Fox and Friends about the controversy over Butker's statement. Quote, "Well, I can only speak from my own experience, which is, I've had the most incredible mom who had the ability to stay home and be with us as kids growing up," she said. "And I understand that there are many women out there who can't make that decision. But for me, in my life, I know it was really formative in shaping me and my siblings to be who we are." Despite the criticism online, Butker received a standing ovation from the graduates and other attendees. And the fans are having their say-so too. Butker's jersey is the top-selling jersey on every official NFL website. Last February, Harrison Butker kicked the longest field goal in Super Bowl history. But this commencement address is what he will be remembered for. Once upon a time, most Americans would have agreed with Butker's view. But now, he's being labeled a right-wing extremist because he won't go along with the new values that are being imposed upon our society. Our culture has been radically transformed, and those that are transforming it have absolutely no tolerance for those that still embrace the old ways. All right, we're getting close to the end of this. Some of you are saying amen. But let me give you this one. This is an interesting article. I've been telling you about Target and how vocal they are with their woke agenda and even putting gay pride things and satanic things in the front of their stores and targeting children. This is really something that's positive, but it's not going far enough. Reversing the woke, Target will be more humble this coming Pride Month. In an extremely gratifying twist, the company that bragged its transgender line is great for our brand has changed its mind after a year-long stock market bruising. I love it. In the latest evidence that the wildfire of consumer activism is not only spreading out, but forcing the kind of change that most people never thought possible. But reversing the woke, that's a tectonic shift in the power structure of big business. For once, CEOs who for years have thrown their radical agenda in the face of shoppers are feeling enough pain in their profit margins to stop and ask if appeasing the far left is worth it. Wow, it's about time. Target CEO Brian Correll, who flaunted the store's chest binders and tucking swimsuits for kids as progress, finally counted the cost of his social extremism late last summer. By the end of a dismal August, he didn't apologize, but he did admit that it was time for some soul searching, you think. As his first and second quarter earnings tanked, he hinted at changes ahead. As we navigate an ever-changing operation and social environment, we're applying what we've learned to ensure we're staying close to our guests and their expectations of Target, he said. Really? What brainiac told you that appealing to LGBTQ+ was good for business? But the activism has obviously gotten to an unsustainable point for business, forcing Target to announce that what would have been unthinkable a year and a half ago, a significant reduction in Pride products. On its website Thursday, the company wanted people to know that this summer's LGBTQ merchandise will not only be limited, but designed with adults, not children, in mind. Of the company's 2,000 stores nationwide, only some will carry the items that landed them in hot water last year. The LGBT movement has immediately blasted Target's decision to put profitability first. So while Americans can and should celebrate the differences they're making with their money, the work isn't over. This muted approach to Pride is still an effort to play both sides. Target is in a crunch, and other companies are going to be in a crunch also. Money talks. And let me tell you something, all of their idealistic values of woke are going to go right down the tubes if their companies start to die. One piece of good news. I always like news like this. If you like any archaeological news, this is a good one. New scientific study affirms the Bible. Jerusalem was a major city under David and Solomon. For decades, archaeologists and historians have debated whether the Bible's description of Jerusalem as a large city during the times of King David and Solomon was accurate, or as skeptics suggested, the biblical account was inaccurate and false, and Jerusalem was instead an insignificant town or a village. Now, though a major new scientific study in Israel has affirmed what Scripture describes as a large urban area. It's part of the research, scientists studied grape seeds, date pits, bat skeletons, and other natural materials found in structures at 4 different excavation areas in the city of David on the eastern and western slopes. Measuring the amount of carbon in the organic material, calculated together with other variables, allowed the researchers to accurately date many findings to the city of David, which they say was huge, and also during Solomon's time. The scientific study, according to the Israeli newspaper, brings tantalizing clues that the city was already a very important urban center in David and Solomon's time, and not an insignificant village, as scholars and more skeptical of biblical historicity have long maintained. God always comes through. Listen, if it's in the Word, trust it. If man says it, be cautious. But the Bible talks about it, and if the Bible says it, trust me, it's true. Let's go a little bit further tonight and go to our in the new study past that to the book of Genesis.